Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome. This is a very late night stream. Why are you so late? Well, because I have something on my mind and nothing really better to do. Because there's nothing better than getting on here and communicating with the family. Well, look. So what we got right now, ladies and gentlemen, is an interesting topic. I was really supposed to be on here earlier, but I was working on a whole lot of content. And oh my goodness. Whew. Let me tell you. Sometimes it gets hectic. Right? So during this late night stream, here's what we're going to do. We're going to be sure to hit that like button. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and share. Oh, yeah. Now, over here, we really like to get into a lot of narrative correction and narrative analysis. Getting a little tongue-tied there. All right? We also delve into constructive criticism and a little bit of ratchetry from time to time. So tonight what we're going to do is we're going to get into this conversation between two great minds here. One is Judge Joe Brown. The other one is Michael Eric Dyson. Shout out to the real Dana. She has this wonderful video going up on her channel, so go to her channel, subscribe if you haven't. Now, without further ado, why don't we just get straight into it? All right, let's see if we could get a start to this debate here.
So it's an honor to have this little tete-a-tete and conversation with such a distinguished figure. Obviously, what's confronting young black men, lack of resources, lack of employment, lack of education.
Now, hold up. I need to know what the conversation is about. Let me rewind this here. Here we go.
They're good and bad people on both sides of the political spectrum.
Okay.
And in order for our democracy to be stable, I mean, we're going to have to veer back to a place where we don't hate one another, but we just disagree with one another.
Okay, now let me get it to where. Okay, here's the guy. Now, one thing that I know, this should be very interesting, because I know Judge Joe Brown. He just says it like it is. When it's time to say something, he doesn't mince words. He lets it be known. You know, I know Judge Joe Brown. I know he's gonna come with the smoke. Now, Michael Eric Dyson, he's a very articulate guy. But, you know, he has a tendency, well, he has been known to do a little bit of pandering, it seems. Like when the election season comes around, he gets a little bit more Democrat-y, see? And some of y'all might remember the edit that I did with Tariq Nasheed kind of calling him out. He was getting a little bit, I don't know, just seemed out of place, just not right. When he was attacking, essentially, black men, nearly blaming them for the reason that Kajani Brown, the Supreme Court Justice, now Supreme Court Justice, at the time she was she was being considered for the spot, black lady, married to a white man. And Michael Eric Dyson essentially was blaming black men for the reason she was married to a white guy. So, you know, I know that there's some problematic things that he said, but he's very articulate, even though sometimes I think he uses way too many words. You know, I understand what he's saying. I just don't think that it's necessary to speak that way, you know, because he doesn't really do that when he's kind of chilling. So I'm like, you might want to, it's cool to show off or whatever. But without further ado, let's just here we go. I'm trying to get closer to the part. Here we go.
Dyson.
There we go. Call them out.
And his opponent, all the way from Washington, D.C., Judge Joe Brown.
Oh, I don't want no copyright strike. Hold up now.
We've heard we've lost.
Here we go. Yeah,
All right, folks, this is the clash of the Titans. We're going to have a conversation and actually have what we call barbershop talk. That means real conversation, real news, and real dialogue this evening. All right, gentlemen, please take your seats. I have Judge Joe Brown on my right. Oh, gotcha. And I have Dr. The man, the myth, you see him on MSNBC, you see him on all publications, Michael Eric Dyson. So, gentlemen.
Let's get it.
All right.
What's going on, Elmer Dixon Cider?
Chopping It Up series. And we wanted, these were questions that came
to
from
the late stream.
The greater Wilmington area about how do we fix issues in the black community. All we ask is that you are honest, straight to the point, and keep it real. All right. First question. It's unfortunate and if you've heard, we've lost one of the Migos characters, Takeoff, due to gun violence. My first question will go with you, Dr. Dyson. What is the biggest issue impacting black males today?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here with Judge Joe Brown, a legendary and iconic figure in our community and indeed in the nation. So it's an honor to have this little tete-a-tete and conversation with such a distinguished figure. Obviously, what's confronting young black men, lack of resources, lack of employment, lack of education, the flooding of our communities and indeed this nation with guns. Back in Judge Joe Brown's day, back in my day, there was a resolution of...
Oh, hold up. You see, now this raggedy commercial is playing here. Now, let this commercial pass. Now, hopefully this guy, Michael Eric Dyson, hopefully he gets straight to the point, because I know he likes to use 1,000 words a minute. And Judge Joe Brown, he's straight to the point. So let's see how this goes.
Disagreement with fisticuffs. Sometimes in a dice game you might get cut. But the rapid proliferation of access to guns has led to a devastating consequence for so many of our communities.
Wait a minute, hold up. I hope that he's not trying to use this get rid of the guns argument. Well, if you're not with guns, if you're for guns, whatever. But I'm just saying, it's quite interesting. If you look all the way back 50, 60, 70 years ago, the demographic was slightly different when you had the Italians out there. And the Italians and the Irish, and they had all the guns. I mean, they had carnage everywhere. Right. I wonder, if they were talking about taking guns away at that time. But anyway, I don't want to get off the beaten path. It's just something to think about. When did this idea all of a sudden happen when you saw certain people with guns? Interesting. Let's keep going.
So we can talk about the ethical and moral outlook that we should encourage, that most black communities encourage upon our young people to take care of themselves, to get educated, to do as best they can in the culture. We go to church, we go to temple, we go to synagogue, we hear the moral lessons being encouraged upon us. But when I look at the devastating consequences of the hatred of the other, what used to be called black-on-black crime, people kill where they live. 93% of black people who are murdered by black people. 83% of white people who are murdered by white people. If you want integrated killing, have integrated communities. The truth is that there is lateral violence, and the violence expressed of one black person to another in intimate spaces where people are killing folk that they know or are familiar with. Because if you're at a game, you at least got to be introduced to somebody.
I gotta cut in just right quick. I don't want to stop this flow, but I just have to add this. Now, how much you want to bet? Judge, I haven't seen this, but how much you want to bet Judge Joe Brown is going to come straight to the point? He's not going to sound like he's preaching. He's going to sound like he's teaching. The difference is like when I hear Michael Larry Dyson talk, it's like, why do you sound like you're there's some sort of disconnect there. It's an odd feeling that I get. It's almost like he's performing, you know. But anyway, let me press play.
Even if he's a victim of either friendly fire or incidental violence, the tragedy is that our communities are gutted because of the devastation of the downward turn in the economy, the lack of access to resources, the failure to understand the necessity of a certain kind of preparation that we take upon ourselves, and as well the ways in which we have been discouraged from believing that our lives are worth something. That doesn't come out of the thin air. That doesn't absolve people of personal responsibility to address the situations in which they could discover themselves, but it's also a collective and institutional enterprise as well.
Same question for you, Judge Joe Brown. What's the biggest issue impacting black men?
I can't tell you what he just got finished saying. I can't tell you what he just said. But anyway, this is Judge Joe Brown.
Today.
All right. Let me start off with a little example to explain it. Anybody in here afraid of me? No, you like me. But I've taken martial arts for 55 years, and there are not many adult humans I can't kill without a weapon very quickly. But you're not worried about me because I have character. I'm here to protect you, not to hurt you. We're seeing a lack of character in our community and across the United States because we are out of balance.
Thank you.
We need women and we need men. But we have attempted to emasculate our communities, and we have no fathers in the homes. We have no fathers in the hood. We have no culture that is putting fatherhood out there so that the boys understand that they are to grow up and be men, and being a man, your job is to make where you live a better, safer, more secure place filled with economic prosperity, sense of purpose, morality, and ethics. You are
What did I tell you?
men of public peace, dignity, and order who can be brave and courageous when necessary. And if we do not teach these young boys that, they grow up to be monsters because they're out of control. Now, as a pragmatic matter, I got elected to 2 8-year terms as a criminal court judge in Tennessee. And over that time period I was in, the statewide recidivism rate for felons was 80%. In my courtroom, I dropped it down to 18%. Anybody that I put on bond, anybody that I put on probation, had to deal with Judge Joe's counseling sessions. And I put manhood in their heads so when they looked in the mirror in the morning, they had a guiding factor. So So whether it was shame, whether it was guilt, they would look at themselves in the mirror and say, did you do what you were supposed to do as a man yesterday? Are you going to do it today? Or are you going to prepare to do it tomorrow? And they come up to me now, 30 years later, and they say, Judge, you remember me? No, sir. Well, you gave me some time.
Yeah.
Did I give you enough? Well, you know, it was that thing about manhood, and now I've got 4 children and 6 grandchildren, and I teach them what you taught me. And I've got 15 young men in the neighborhood that I'm trying to counsel so they become positive factors. So when I do that, I don't think it's all worthless and there's no purpose. There is a reason. And even if I'm not here tomorrow, I did something to help the other people see the daylight at the end of the tunnel, and I become a hero. That is what I'm trying to do. We have to put character back in the hood. I passed the mic.
Oh, God, dog. Hold up. Now, if I had to give my assessment just of that right there, just from what I heard, just in their introduction, I would have to say, look, I think Judge Joe Brown's message was quite clear. Michael Everett Dyson, I don't know what he was saying, but he sounded like he was speaking to some of the ills that take place in the hood. It is saying something is going on with my stream on my end. But anyway, and he's essentially saying that there is a culture of emasculating the hood, where being a man is not popular. I've seen this. You know, I don't know if there are people out there that are afraid to let that be known, that they see that. I mean, what do we see? We see stuff like the woman king. Come on now. What is that? If that's not trying to emasculate, especially the black community, because, you know, I mean, what other community would insult the men like that? So, yeah, so we see this, I believe that it's a broader thing, like worldwide even. We see this emasculinization, especially, you know, when they can get their hands on a big black buck. Oh, yeah, throw him in a dress. You know, Terry Crews. Shout out to him. You know, but he's essentially saying, listen, you destroy the man, everything falls. Cut all that nonsense out. Look, all that mess. No, destroy the man, everything falls. Because we know who protects the hoods. The men. And then when you don't have men there to protect the hoods and it's just you, well, you wind up raising monsters. That's essentially what he said. His word. Well, let's keep going. Let's see where this direction goes here. Come on.
All right, Dr. Dyson, this question is for you. Given the political climate today, before now, what efforts have been made individually and collectively by the Biden administration to understand what Black America experiences today?
Well, obviously, the Biden administration has made certain strategic moves, certain substantive moves, certain political moves, and certain legislative moves, right? So when you think about the fact that Biden committed to run with a black woman, right, the first in history.
Oh, God damn. Okay. Maybe I should let it play. But if you don't stop this nonsense, Michael Everett Dyson, don't you make me, boy, don't you make me take my belt off, Michael Everett Dyson. If you don't get it the first a black woman in history, man, put that nonsense down. You know, I don't want to go in too soon. Let me see where you're going with this, Michael Everett Dyson. God, dog, he's too democratic. Like he seems like he can't really be objective because he's so democratic. Oh, here we go.
And then put a black woman on the Supreme Court who's already earning her keep by asking penetrating questions, by being far more vocal than the black man who occupies that space. When Judge Joe Brown talks about character, it ain't just in the hood, it's those who wear hoods, right? And I think it's critical that Joe Biden's symbolic in terms of black women in these critical places are also symbolic gestures, although they have substantive impact, are also accompanied by efforts to redress the economic inequity in the country. So when you see Republicans pushing back on right now the ability of black people to be able to, as other citizens, enjoy $20,000 of reparation, if you will, for student loans. The right wing is organized against that because it's not.
Now you already know my antenna went up when he said that, but let me stop and let him go.
Explicitly racially based, though it has racial consequence. They are arguing against that because it helps black people. Again, who could take a lesson, not only the Migos, but the right-wing Republicans who refuse to acknowledge the systemic complicity and white supremacist orientation of their entire tradition, trajectory, and history against the betterment of the masses of people, including, by the way, poor and working class white folk, right? So they need character too, all right? Joe Biden, in terms of trying to put forth arguments about distribution of resources in terms of health care, trying to extend what has been called Obamacare to protect it. The Supreme Court so far, surprising to many, including Chief Justice Roberts, have protected that particular health care mandate that has been translated into legislation that has helped millions of people in our communities. The attempt to even reduce, and the judge and I were speaking about this earlier, the disparity between powder and crack cocaine. We know it was significantly reduced, but it still needs to be reduced. And then the other day, freeing all those people, or insisting that they be freed, who were put in jail for abuse.
Okay, I gotta stop right here. I gotta stop right here. Okay, if you're giving your take on Biden right now, and then you're gonna sit there talking about, what did he say about crack? Listen to this part. What he said about crack.
Mandate that has been translated into legislation that has helped millions of people.
Watch this.
In our communities. The attempt to even reduce, and the judge and I were speaking about this earlier, the disparity between powder and crack cocaine. We know it was significantly reduced.
Okay, so he's talking about the disparity in the sentencing, but you're sitting there talking about Biden. How about you talk about how he's giving crack pipes out? I mean, talk about reducing how about trying to reduce the usage of crack? But, that was part of, I guess, the reparations package. Here goes your crack pipe. You talk about insults, I mean, look, I don't know. Maybe some people out there, they really love him. I don't know. But to me, that's an insult. You have all these black people out there just saying, hey, we want this. Hey, we want that. How about I give you Juneteenth? Okay. Right. But here's a list of things that we were asking for. Ice Cube, he came at you with his package here. How about a crack pipe instead? Oh, okay. I mean, it's crazy to me, all the people that have short-term memory. But anyway, here we go.
Reduced, but it still needs to be reduced. And then the other day, freeing all those people, or insisting that they be freed, who were put in jail for abusing some weed. Now again, right, we ain't trying to justify folks smoking weed, because most of y'all in this room done smoked it. You just ain't got caught, so you going to church and acting like the Holy Ghost got you when you barely skated through on that sticky green. So, at least I've heard that. I've looked at Joe's courtroom. I've seen that. I'm not sure. So the thing is that there are strategic deployments of messages to the black community, of substantive messages to the black community, of substantive politics to the black community. Does there need to be more? Yes. We'll look at what happened with the IRA. The point is that the black farmers were left high and dry, so that Attorney Benjamin Crump is suing in order to get restored to them the reparative monies that were delivered to them, or at least promised to them, I should say, because of the systemic inequities that farmers face. So yeah, there are a patchwork of legislation, of strategic and symbolic gestures. And let's be honest, when the judge speaks about character, he's right. Look at the orange apparition that beclouded the American horizon for 4 years and that continues to do so. Thank God Elon Musk didn't own Twitter then, because he would be standing up every morning to excrete the feces of his moral depravity into a nation he's turned into a psychic commode. So for me,
Wow.
it is both policy, it is practice, it is behavior, and it is tone that is set as well. Because to open ourselves to a white supremacist demagogue with crypto-fascist impulses and neo-authoritarian impulses needs to be held in check. So even though he's an old white man that folks say is, on the downswing, I disagree with that. He's an old white man doing what he does. We got Judge Joe Brown up here, 75 years old, and sprightly as anybody up in this room. So I say I love older people doing their thing. Let's keep this man in office a little bit longer to see what he gonna do.
Burr? Listen, well, there you have it. I don't want to be too, biased here. I want to be very objective. So let me just, woosah. Isn't that quite interesting? Let's see what Joe Biden is going to do. Keep him in office. I love old people. I got the last of what he said, even though he kind of went in on Trump a little bit. And then he was talking about essentially Joe Biden is extending what Obama was doing. So I don't know. This is interesting. Let's just see what Judge Joe Brown is going to say before I really go in.
Let's put it this way. First off, I was a lifelong Democrat. Now I'm an independent. I played football in high school in LA at Dorsey High and also at UCLA. Long time ago. I remember I detested and despised our quarterback. I hated his guts, but I blocked for him because he delivered the passes that got the touchdowns made. They got the championship. All right? You don't have to like somebody to go for them. Now, that said, I detest and despise the current president. 50-some years ago, I was down here in Dover doing research for a DC think tank that I was interning for. I heard a commotion outside, and I went out, and there was John B. Stennis. There was Eastland. There was Faulus. That's the guy that stood in the doorway of Little Rock High School and said those young Negro, black, Afro-American, African-American black students, some of whom I have met in life, were not going in there. Bird was there, and they were introducing the new up-and-coming Dixiecrats, and I Dixiecrat. And I saw a young man with a ducktail looking back like he was back in 1950-something. And he said some of the most disgusting things I'd ever heard said about my people. He's in the White House right now. Now, you have to look deeply at what is actually going on. Let's take the forgiveness of the student loan thing. Sounds good, except when you back off, any place in the rest of the world that you had a 4-year college degree, you would be firmly in the middle class. In the United States of America, the Labor Department has said the middle class makes, if you're just one person, $125,000 a year, and that is the cutoff point for any relief under this thing with the student loans. So when they're giving you relief, that is a testimony that something is wrong here because you're not making what you ought to make with your education. Meanwhile, let's back off. Was it wholeheartedly done, or is there another purpose involved? Well, if you are a bank or a financial institution, you no longer have to wait for these loans to be paid off in installments. You get all of your interest and a complete repayment on the obligation all at one time. You can discharge people in your loan collection departments. You don't have court costs and attorney fees to take people to court. You make a ball. Meanwhile, some people are happy, but their financial circumstances still haven't changed, and they're not in the middle class, even though they've got a 4-year degree. Why is that? Because the country is not dealing with what it ought to deal with, because computerization and industrial technology have made most working class people obsolete. So there are not enough jobs going around to enough people. So what we do is the same thing when we have a surplus in any kind of commodity, whether it is wheat, corn, cotton, or people. We do 3 things. We store the surplus. That's the jail cell instead of the grain silo. You have a subsidy of the would-be producer. That's the government check that people become too dependent upon. You pay the farmer ordinarily, say not to grow soy, and you cut back production. Well, the farmer doesn't grow soy, but in our case, with all the negatives on social media, entertainments, the kids bang out, drug out, drop out, get pregnant too early, too often, don't develop any vocational skills, any academic excellence. They have wrong ideation. They turn where they live into chaos-filled areas. They just are unemployable, and when they get that first felony, then you don't have to worry about them. And why is that important? Because there's some guys, one of whom was named Timothy McVeigh, get real worked up and they go down and buy $250 worth of ammonium nitrate fertilizer, and they go blow up a courthouse in Oklahoma City and kill 240-some people. Well, they don't want that, so they come up with a safety valve. You have schoolhouse to jailhouse pipelines, and you put people who are in a position where there's surplus to the labor requirements in there, and everybody gets to talking about free to righteous brothers in the penitentiary, which that has some traction. But I know from 50 years in criminal law, you have 97+% who pled guilty. They didn't get found guilty. Got 84 to 87% that confessed. Some people are not guilty. They're not guilty people. I got the youngest person in the world off death row. He was 15 years and 2 months when I got a stay of execution, 23 minutes before they were going to execute him in Arkansas. Now, yeah, there are things that happen, but we have to develop this character thing so we don't get people put in.
And now we're letting this commercial pass. Here we go.
Robbing their neighbors, raping their neighbors, gangstering their neighbors, killing their neighbors, and trying to deal with a new thing, which is suicide by a neighbor rather than suicide by a cop, and get themselves in a mess where we have to worry about where we go at night, when we go there at night, and now in the daytime. See, there's some things to be done, so don't worry about whether you like somebody. Just think of it as you're on a team And even if you don't like your quarterback personally, you want him to throw that touchdown pass, and you block for him. Now,
Speaking of education, and I want
Look, let me tell you something. Judge Joe Brown is gonna let it be known, because this man is he's been around, and he's letting it be known. I don't like that man. I do not like the man, Joe Biden. You know how he said he despises him, and this is really hard for, I believe, a Michael Eric Dyson to even have this level of conversation with the man that is considerably, older and more experienced in this world, especially with politicians, than he has. This man has stories for everything. Anyway, let's keep going. We'll go for a little bit, and then I believe that we'll go ahead on and have a part 2. Let's keep going.
to ask both of you this question. This came from the audience. What are your thoughts? I'll start with you, Dr. Dyson. What are your thoughts on critical race theory? Some say it's telling the truth on American history. Others say it's anti-American rhetoric. Your thoughts?
Oh, God, dog. Okay, let me see. Okay. Woo! Prepare your ears. Here we go.
Yeah, well, and I just want to amplify what the judge said. Character, again. When you got your family to hook up in the White House as your advisors, when you're using American economy as an extension to bankroll your own practices and commodifying cultural consciousness and political practice to serve your own venal, vicious ends, they ain't got no character. And you talk about white collar crime versus blue collar crime, and it's true. And the judge is absolutely right. Ain't nobody arguing. This is no brief in defense of thugs. But there are thugs everywhere. And the thugs have to be called out where they are. We know one group will be identified, because what the judge is speaking about, the reason y'all amen in it, y'all believe that if you do the crime, you should do the time. Y'all believe that your community should not be rife with all kinds of moral pollution. But the other side, that claim they believe the same thing, January 6th proved they don't believe none of that. They don't believe no Blue Lives Matter. They were devastating the police people on that day. They don't believe in the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, the Federalist Papers. They took a Confederate flag, the banner of disloyalty, and drug it through the United States Capitol, the very embodiment, symbolically speaking, of democratic practice, small d. And then imagine if a brother or sister thugging out and thugged up on that put his feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk. Oh, and by the way, the other day somebody went to her crib. Speaking of thuggery, speaking of lack of character, the white supremacist crackerocracy, the rule, reign, and tyranny of white supremacist ideals, norms, and values, I'm talking specifically about that, show themselves to be bankrupt. So Juju and Jamal and them need to be held to account, and the rest of these thugs need to be thrown in jail who work for us in American democracy. Now, to answer your point about education, critical race theory, and we have one of the most distinguished jurists in our nation sitting on this platform here.
He's the performer.
Critical race theory is a legal theory. Invented first by Derek Bell, right, who was working with James Meredith in Mississippi, and then became the first tenured law professor at Harvard University. And Kimberly Crenshaw, Gary Peller, Marie Matsuda, Charles Lawrence. Right? It's you would call it an egghead theory, in the sense that us eggheads, philosophers and theoreticians and academicians, we up in the academy, we're coming up with very practical considerations that have theory at their base. And all critical race theory says, when it comes to thinking about institutional racism, don't think individuals, think institutions. Yeah. It's not whether or not you call me the N-word, it's whether or not the tax base will determine who gets an education and who gets the best education. Or the tax base and the property base will determine the distribution of goods and resources for education. So you might have a 70, 80, $90 million school out in the suburbs of Philadelphia or in Delaware, and in the inner city, barely running water with textbooks still second and third hand. So critical race theory is simply saying, as a legal philosophy, let's think not individual but institution, not particular persons but systems, in terms of the force and function of inequality in America. They ain't teaching no 5th grade students no daggum CRT. These white folk, for the most part, and Negroes too, who are against CRT, wouldn't know the difference between CRT and OPP. Right? And so, critical race theory, I've taught it for years.
Let me tell you, I have to interject quite briefly. Look, it's a waste of time. You know, CRT. Look, how about CTC? CTC and keep your CRT. CTC, cut the check. Anyway, let's keep going.
It's a philosophically dense, theoretically propitious, very concentrated form of thought about the social structural inequities that prevail, that disallow certain communities to inherit goods and services for which they pay their precious tax dollars. So CRT is critical and necessary, but what they're trying to be against is the teaching of history in general. If you look at Ron DeSantis, what he did when he signed that anti-CRT bill was saying what? We don't want white students to be uncomfortable. Guess what, homie? Discomfort is the basis of true education. Unless you hear a Judge Joe Brown go against what you think is the commonsensical way, and he twisted with his homespun genius, you're going to get uncomfortable because he's spitting some truth into you that you don't want to deal with, but that will motivate you to think differently about your situation. We are not here to make you comfortable. We're here to tyrannize your comfort when it rests upon inequality and the refusal to acknowledge the humanity of the masses of people. So CRT ain't about darn trying to make white folk guilty. It's about holding to account what the judge said. If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. These lack of character having politicians who refuse to abide by the same principles that they live by. Let us have the same insurance you got up on Capitol Hill. Let the masses of American citizens enjoy those privileges. So for me, it's about anti-education. It's about, look, they love history except when it comes to us. 15,000 books on Abraham Lincoln. Books on even Aaron Burr, who, as you know, is Raymond Burr's cousin. All right, I just want to see if y'all knew Perry Mason. So the point is that critical race theory is a theory, a legal, academic theory that got taken by a young white student, graduated from Georgetown, who when reading the anti-racist literature discerned the repetition of citation of critical race theory and said, that will preach
Okay.
to the conservative firebrand. I can use that to manipulate the consciousness of poor people, of working class white people, and of ignorant people of history to make them believe that what they're trying to teach your kid is critical race theory. No, we're trying to teach them about democracy. We're trying to teach them about white supremacy and slavery. We're trying to teach them about the beauty and the power and the beauty, the elegance of the country in which we live, and some of the historical factors of the brutality and ugliness that we did at the same time. You can't love some history. Either you love history altogether or you don't love history at all. They reenact these Civil War battles. They dress up. They put all the costumes on. But one book about black slavery, oh my God, no. One book that talks about 1619, oh no. The point is, either you are deeply imbued with a historical consciousness and an appreciation for history, or you ain't. Gore Vidal had it right. We live in the United States of amnesia. And many of these folk believe that Barbara Streisand supplies the theme song. What's too painful to remember, we simply choose to forget. And if you don't like Barbara Streisand, Gladys Knight did a hell of a remix of that song.
All right. I want to say.
Okay. Well, you know, look, he's a performer, and sometimes you need to perform to get the message across. But you know, there are certain things that he said with that CRT. I'm gonna hold on to my opinion until after Judge Joe Brown gives his remarks on it.
The conversation, it was mentioned, Blue Lives Matter was mentioned, Judge Brown. I want to ask you, do you believe in the concept of defunding the police? How should policing be reformed today?
Well, since I'm running for mayor of Memphis, I have an extensive and very detailed plan to do something about it. No, the police do not need to be defunded because crime is rampant everywhere, including in the black communities. What we do need is a total revision of the structure of the typical U.S. police department. Police department needs to be restructured like the U.S. Pentagon and the Department of Defense. You have a civilian commander-in-chief, that's the president, a civilian secretary of defense, one over the Army, one over the Navy, et cetera, sub-secretaries who are civilians. We need the same thing. We don't need civil service chiefs of police. We need civilian directors. We need sub-directors over homicide, uniform patrol, sex crimes, property crimes, traffic, etc. We need direct communications input by the citizenry. You have a thing that you can see in good operation down in Detroit called Dads in Schools. Yeah. And we need the same thing where we get the people in the community who are allowed to participate and go out in patrols, regulated.
I gotta interject. I agree wholeheartedly with everything that the judge is saying here. You see, because what happened is the men have been, there's an exodus. There was a point in time that even the gangsters in the hood, even the gangsters, they will police the neighborhood. They were not terrorists within their own neighborhood. They actually would protect the hood from outsiders, and they would stand in between the citizenry and rogue police officers. You know, I mean, let's not pretend like there wasn't a history of rogue police officers. Now, what they were used to was behaved citizenry. And behaved citizenry was the type of people that gave up Emmett Till, because, you know, those guys, they came over there and, you know, they just gave them a willingly because they were very cooperative people down there in Mississippi. Well, that's kind of what they were used to. But then when certain brothers stood up and went out there to protect the neighborhood, these were fathers, these were sons, these were brothers, these were citizens that saw a rogue and problematic element within what was supposed to be the protectors in law enforcement, right? And they stood in between that and stood in between all of the outsiders that came in. I mean, think about Maya Angelou, who saw that movie, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. You know, after someone violated her, it quickly shows the scene where it was her uncles. And her uncles went out there and handled that with the quickness, allegedly. See? So we know, I mean, you know, there was not much need for police officers when you had men in the neighborhood. Typically, police officers would show up after everything was done, after the crime was done. But the men in the hood, they were the ones that prevented the crime from taking place in the first place. All right? I like the direction Judge Brown is going here. Let's listen a little more. We'll go We'll go 15 more minutes into this, and then we'll resume for part 2 later. Here we go.
Along with the police so they can say, young man, come here. What do you think you're doing? We need to talk with you. And we need to start putting the civilian context back in what's going on. And the other thing is that police, in my experience, have been a one-one reflection of the political realities in the area. If the police don't treat you like anything, your representation is not good. Examine the people that you have chosen to represent you because they're not doing their job. Now, all that being said, we don't need to defund the police. We need to revise what police are about. They are supposed to be protecting and serving us. And then several things you have to take into context in American law. It has been held by the U.S. Supreme Court and the federal appellate courts over and over again. The police have no obligation to protect anyone except those people they actually have in custody. If in the process of stopping criminal activity, they protect you, that's incidental because their primary business is to keep public peace, dignity, and order. So nobody's protecting you. Second Amendment is going out of the window sometimes. The police aren't there for you, so what are you supposed to do? That is a problem, and that's where we are right now. So somehow or another along this line of thought, we have to say we have to take back our neighborhoods. They belong to us. We ought to be deeply ashamed that our children have run the parents and the adults out of their own houses. I'm not used to that. And I don't see why you should. Take control of where you live. We run off at the mouth all the time. Why don't you, by the way, go pull the coattail on your pastor? Say, Pastor, what's happened? I haven't heard you preach about sin and its wages in a long time. Somebody said, why don't you go to church much, Judge? I said, I haven't heard a sermon on sin and the wages in 30-some years. Yes. What are you doing? It's all about belief, not deeds. Well, somewhere along the line, somebody's got to say, oh, no, that's wrong. You can't do that. And I hollered a preacher 2 weeks ago. You know what he told me? Judge, we can't say that anymore. I said, why not? Because everybody get up and walk out the congregation. Now, if you don't want to behave, if you don't want to hear about it, don't complain about it. A lot of things that need to be said are uncomfortable. A lot of things might sound good, but they're not good for you. What do we tell our children? Don't eat that candy. Why don't they eat the candy? It tastes good, but it rots their teeth. Gives them bad habits.
Mommy! Mommy, wake up! Stop smacking your mother like that. Mommy! Will you talk? Will you talk? Will you talk to me? Talk to me! Talk to me! Yo!
get some hyper and acting like they've lost their little minds. So we need to do that with ourselves. Enough of this feel-good candy, and whether you like somebody or not, let's do the cold-blooded calculus. I have one vote, maybe can contribute to somebody's election. What do I get for that vote? You and yours get what you need? Or are you wanting and you look at somebody else getting a lot and you get nothing? And then basically,
I'm not sure if I was talking all of this time and muted myself accidentally. Here I am holding this show, and for some apparent reason, the sound is just out. Wow. Okay, hold up. That was crazy. So all of that stuff was completely out of context. Y'all didn't even hear. Oh, well, here we go.
decency, it's about honor, and it's about respect. Are we supporting somebody's policy where that's gone out the window? Or are we trying to say, I don't care, I don't like the quarterback, but I got a block for this guy because I want him to score a touchdown? Remember, I'm an independent. I don't care about anybody except what's effective.
So Judge Brown, speaking of what's effective, let me ask you, and then I'll come back to you, Dr. Dyson. What are your thoughts on voter suppression? Is it racist? Is it wrong to require people to have ID when they vote?
No, it's not wrong to have ID. I represented, still acquainted with murderers, thieves, thugs, gangsters, and they all have driver's licenses. I mean, you're trying to thug out. I mean, you driving down the street, no license, you going straight to jail. So they have driver's licenses. In just about every state, if you want to register to vote, you get it through the DMV. Right. If you can get a driver's license, you can get a voter's registration card. Come on. That's specious. Now, next thing. Since 2008 in Shelby County until 4 or 5 months ago, the feds put up funds to replace every one of the corrupted, hacked voting machines we had in that county. The Justice Department under Bush, under Obama, under Trump, and under Biden say those machines are hopelessly corrupted, and you people haven't had a fair election since 2000. At one time, the Republican Party controlled that. Right now, it's the Democratic Party, and every single time it's come up resolution, let's use the federal money that they put up to replace these machines and get some fair ones, it has been voted down, and nobody's questioning it. So who's doing what? See, everybody needs to be held to account. So when you have a system that plays fast and loose with you, that isn't truthful with you, and it's like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, it gets scary when our forums get controlled and somebody says this is private enterprise, we can control what you hear if we don't like it. Oh. They have to broadcast. They impact commerce and communications interstate, so they should be public utilities. But since Musk took over Twitter, strangely, I picked up about 3,000 followers in 2 days. They've been shadow blocking before. And now I just posted an article, a study that came out that said real live people are actually checking out what you are doing and posting on these institutions and blocking them if they don't like it and it doesn't go with their agenda.
Stop. Pause. I gotta. Yes. Let me tell you something. That is exactly what YouTube does. That's exactly what YouTube does. Now, here's the interesting thing. They said that the N-word jumped up on Twitter. They said, there was some reports of that. And, I believe that. But, that I believe it comes with part of the territory. It's not really saying, yo, this is Elon Musk, tweeting the N-word this many times. But no, what it's saying is when there are these entities that try to repress certain messages, your message is getting repressed too. When you get out there, listen, they'll put certain words in the algorithm. They'll put FBA, black, manosphere, reparations, all sorts of different keywords. When they put it in there, it will trigger the algorithm and it'll automatically categorize your video as problematic. Well, what Judge Joe Brown is saying, Elon Musk, when he took over Twitter, he removed all those restrictions. Judge Joe Brown said, well, that was evidence as soon as Elon Musk took over. That was evidence that his channel was being, suppressed. And all of a sudden now he's getting all of this traffic. That's the exact same thing that happens right here on YouTube. I mean, I put hours and hours and hours into, some of that content that I create. I mean, I sit and I focus on it because I'm kind of a perfectionist and I want it to be right. Well, it gets discouraging when you put all those hours in and you only get 10 views, 100 views. And it's like, okay, y'all are doing this on purpose. Ain't no way I go from 30,000 to 100. It's like, yeah, that's what they do. They set these things to intentionally keep you from growing. So I like the direction that he's going with this. He's getting straight to the point. Let's go.
Wow. There were supposed to be algorithms, but I guess they weren't. The algorithm cut me off. Can't trust these things.
Mic check, please.
No mic, I'll yell. Look in here. In other words, just because you hear it doesn't mean it's true.
Come on.
If you want to find out something, go look yourself. Go read a lot of things because what they put out there is not necessarily the truth. If you want the truth, go witness it yourself. And another point, and we're drifting off here. Yes, black people get jacked around. I have certainly throughout my life. But it is too easy to try and turn us all against each other, black, white, brown, red, yellow, so a certain select few corrupt crooks can get what they want. We're all in this together. All of us.
Yes.
This is our home. And if you have somebody on the bottom and you keep them down there, they get dissatisfied. If your foundation is decaying, it doesn't improve just because you put a new paint job on it. You have to do something so everybody has a piece of this action. Everybody is provided with the resources to deal with self-help, to deal with self-advancement, to deal with providing for themselves and those that depend upon them. You have to deal with their character so they know who is depending upon them. You have to deal with what's in their heads so they are prepared to function in the 21st century. And then we can go someplace if we stop trying to keep somebody on the bottom. Now, be green for all I care, but if you got a good thing going on, I'll listen to you. Thank you. Pass the mic.
Still works. All right, same question for you, Dr. Dyson. Again, voter suppression. Should people be required to have IDs when they vote?
Well, look, first of all, I want to say what the judge said about policing. It's so refreshing to hear. Because even if you disagree about, those who say defund the police, they got in mind what the judge is talking about. So at some level, it's terminological and it's about nomenclature, not about the substantive philosophy. Figure out ways to take money from over here and put it over there. When they talk about defunding, they're saying, they ain't even got a problem with defunding the darn education system. They defunded that all the darn time, right? So what is it about the police? Only in a militaristic society where the law and order enforcement becomes primary in its need, you're living in a fascist authoritarian country. So what's interesting about it, though, I love what he said about the civilian presence on these, review boards and taking people to account, and the brilliant way in which he deconstructed that is so valuable. Because it used to be that community policing, like the judge said, you in the neighborhood, come here, Johnny, stop doing that. Come here, Shanae, stop doing that. When we had intimate relations where you lived, where you police. But the right wing especially don't believe you should live where you police. So the police that killed Freddie Gray came in from Delaware, went over to Baltimore, because it's not they cousin. They mama. When they're mistreating us, they don't see themselves in us, right? So we don't smell like them, talk like them, think like them, process like them, even though we just like you as human beings. So we see white people with machetes in their hand trying to kill police and they refuse to shoot them. You saw the video of a white cop running from a white boy. The white boy took his car. And the white man with the gun was running up the hill. Can we get some of that? Right? That's what we're talking about at the end of the day. Character of these characters needs to be reformed in a fundamental way. Now, to answer your question about voter suppression, I think what the judge said is right. There is overwhelming evidence that there's voter suppression. And voter suppression is about local Republican legislators that gerrymander districts, that cut them up and carve them up.
Yeah.
And when you look at the distribution of Republicans and Democrats, the Republican-controlled state legislatures have changed the landscape of American politics, because they're determining who goes to what district, who can get elected, who can be forced in, and who can be forced out. Voter suppression is real. Study after study has suggested that it's real. And I hear the judge is funny about that's a funny story about the thugs having ID. Some of them, they done made it up, but that's all right. They got the ID, right? It's counterfeit, but they got the ID. Now, what's interesting is you can have a gun ID and register to vote, but a college ID, you're disqualified. Hold it now, I'm confused. It is a issued ID, right, that allows you. Now, we know it's about federally issued IDs and so on and so forth. A lot of folk can't afford them, believe it or not. A lot of folk can't afford to pay that money. Just because you can afford to pay that money, you would think, oh my God, you can pay $30 and $40. A lot of folk can't do it. So they distribute the necessity for an ID law. Why wasn't it a necessity when George Bush #1 got in office, or even George Bush #2? Why was the law changed after that? The judge is right in terms of...
Okay, I got to interject here. Look, listen, there's a lot of foreign exchange students that come to college, that have that get college IDs. Foreign exchange students are not qualified to vote. So why would you have someone that has a college ID and say, well, that's good enough ID to vote? Well, I don't know. I don't know. I got to dig deeper into that one.
So the timeline, 2008, 2004, before then, why was it good enough for George Bush to get in, but when Obama comes into play, there's a different set of principles and practices that are put forth? We ain't got to be no genius to understand that the right-wing junta in this country is using every measure and every stratagem possible to reintroduce poll taxes, to reintroduce literacy taxes. In other words, every particular strategy that will deny people access when the judge talks about what's going on in other countries in terms of getting money, in $20,000 forgiven, first of all, most other countries got free education. Right. You ain't got to worry about no damn student loan because you ain't got to pay for it in the beginning because your tax dollars already will supplement it. They do that in California, they do it in other places. So how about making education accessible to the masses? How about having a national holiday for voting? Why you got to be taken off from your job because they not interested in everybody voting? They want fewer and fewer people to vote. The Republicans have admitted that. They've done studies where they've said, we don't want these people necessarily voting. It's too much access. I'm confused. I thought you were about democracy. No, you want your particular ideology to prevail. Study after study has shown the obvious and manifest injustice of the demand for voter ID laws, and the voter ID laws popped up at a certain historical juncture in this country when the right wing seized power. It was all right for Nixon to get elected under that. It was all right for Gerald Ford to get elected under that. It was all right for Ronald Reagan to get elected under that. It was all right for George Bush #1 to get elected under that. In other words, for a whole bunch of Democrats and Republicans. So let's not be hoodwinked and bamboozled by the stratagems of a white ring hunter in this country to undermine democracy. The moment we split citizen from voter, when you born in this country and you legitimate citizen, you ought to have the right to vote. That is the inheritance of the best of democracy. Now, I end by saying this. When voting first went into effect, women couldn't vote. Enslaved African people couldn't vote. Only if you were a property-owning white male did you have the possibility of voting. So when we fight for the release of unduly strictured laws against voting, it don't just help black people, it helps the masses of Americans. I'm for more people voting. I believe if you don't win this time, try it next time. Let me tell you what sore losers the right wing are. We didn't win. It must have been illegal. It must have been immoral. They must have had a trick. The fix is in. My team didn't win. The Philadelphia Eagles are 7-0. If they lose one time, the Philadelphians might go, it's the fixed in. You know Jalen Hurts wasn't hurt. You know what happened there. A.J. Brown didn't do the damn thing. You're going to come up with a conspiracy theory. The right wing claims to love justice, but they hate justice. They hate democracy. They hate more people voting. And what you should do is demand the right for every citizen in this nation to have access to that vote.
Judge Brown, speaking of justice, because I want to get through this question. When you hear people respond to Black Lives Matter by saying all lives matter, what are your immediate thoughts?
Freedom of speech.
Okay.
And I've been warning people about the fraud that BLM has been putting out there for a long time. See, I could buy whiskey and vote before the 60s were out. And I know what we did, all the people that died, because it was dangerous being against the party lines back then. People shot you, not for robbing you, not for police using an excuse that you were a black man running, but because of your politics. And I know that there is a problem out there with what we are perceiving now. January 6th, it was deplorable, but there are 185 people. I saw that all the time back in the 60s when one college or high school got upset because their team didn't go to the bowl game. When I think of riots, I think of being in South Central in 1965 where they called out a division of the Army to put it down, and there are 15,000 armed troops out there to do it. And you look from horizon to horizon if you turn around and everything's on fire. That's a riot. I think of take your booties to the poll. And when you start talking about voter suppression, are you trying to take that non-thinking group out there so you can manipulate them like they're sheep? Remember, I'm not on anybody's side. I'm independent. I just want to see effectiveness. I remember a client of my law office. He got cheated badly 22 years ago. His name, Al Gore. He was client for our office. See, both sides do this. The Republicans did it then, and I don't care what anybody says. I saw some of the fraud up close and personal this last time. Where I live, with the voting machine totals coming out of the 14th largest city in America. Part of the game, but it needs to stop. And the voters need to be enlightened and educated and benefiting of a free press where you can hear everything, not just those things that pass an agenda. Now, I was a teaching assistant for a visiting professor way back when. And she said, America is in grave danger of becoming a fascist country. Not from some jackboot wearing, goose stepping, uniformed political thugs, but as she put it, from some long-haired beatniks who will impose the worst methods of fascism in the name of doing something for you. Read 1984, read Animal Farm, both by Orwell if you want to get a line on it. It's dangerous. And I don't get it about people's sensitive feelings. I mean, I grew up when we used to run the dozens in elementary school, junior high school. Hey, man, I won't say nothing, man, but your house there's night, man. And your mama, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Now they go, you talk about my mama, man. Calm down. All in art form.
Very true. Everybody is too sensitive today. Everything is being censored, you know. That's why you got a lot of weak guys, you know, too sensitive. The moment that they hear something, you know, they're ready to jump to violence. You know, man, we used to play the dozens all the time. Oh boy, I got pretty good at it too.
But you see, Black Lives Matter is what I saw back then when everybody was trying to hustle. You had a lot of people who were sincere with what they were doing, and some other ones that just said, let me pimp this cause, let me hustle this cause, and see how much money I can get. Years later, I made some Freedom of Information request, and oh yeah, I knew it back when. He was a snitch. He was an informant. He was an agent. I mean, somebody I knew one time, interesting, I knew him well. He was supposed to be a medic, just got back from the Nam. He was always helping folk out. Oh, every now and then what we did, people would get injured. Some years later, I was in law school and I attended this murder trial to watch, and they bring him out. I thought, oh, this dude's an informant. They said, no, this is Lieutenant Tackwood, long head of the counterintelligence section, special investigative services for Los Angeles Police Department. I said, oh, wow. You know, I mean, it's a real thing. I went to a school where in broad daylight, two individuals I recruited to UCLA, John Huggins and Bunchy Carter from the Panther Party, got shot down in broad daylight. They hauled the acting chancellor of the University of California, Los Angeles, 68,000 students at the time, black guy. LAPD went over, stuck a shotgun in his back and escorted him across a mile of campus to handcuff him to a chair like he had something to do with it. Hell, they tried to kill me, put 4 bullet holes in the back of my chair, where I was supposed to be, up in Campbell Hall, where we decided that we weren't getting taught what we needed, so we decided we're gonna get taught that, and we want the full panoply of instruction, so we imposed it. Now Campbell Hall's still there, but they moved the Minority Studies Department over to Bunch Hall, the largest building on UCLA's campus, where they have more than 100,000 full-time students. It's a small city. But you go over there now, and these people who don't realize all the folk that died to get that department set up, they're sipping Chablis and nibbling crackers and talking about, did you go see the play the other day? And Professor Crenshaw is over there, who is trying to get tenured, and a roommate of mine, now a doctor, I remember that, 1967, me, you, so-and-so, Professor so-and-so, and so-and-so, we came up with this Black Studies program. So take a look at this. I said, that's that critical race theory thing. It looks just like it, but there are some changes. We switched from get motivated, get angry, here are the buttons to push, this is how it works, these are your objectives, go do something about it. Now we switched over to everybody is so awful and we need to appeal to somebody to make it all right, like somebody that's been jacking you over, like a lot of crooks I dealt with over the last 50 years. They ain't gonna change unless you make there some consequences to it. And if you don't deliver consequences to somebody when they aren't doing right, you're not getting anywhere. And see, I still think, man, I've seen all of these presidents. I've been alive since Truman was president. Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy. We debated on whether Kennedy should be in. LBJ. I met two of his children, by the way, he had while he was president. One with the White House secretary and another one with a lady named Marie Brown, who introduced me to her son and the other one. No relation. Then there was Tricky Dick Nixon, and one of my frat brothers ran against Tricky Dick. He was Hubert Humphrey, but he was in Alpha Phi Alpha. So Kamala Harris is not the first somebody in a black Greek organization to be vice president. Then let's see, there was Jerry Ford, met him, and then there was Jimmy Carter, met him, didn't read Ronald Reagan, but let's see, then there was George W. Herbert Walker Bush, and let's see, he had an interesting first cousin who was the grandfather of the president after Nixon, and then there was his father, his son George W. Bush, and then his cousin Barack Obama, through the mother, became president. So we had George Herbert Walker Bush, who was first cousins to the grandfather of Barack Obama, was president. I mean, it's kind of interesting picture when you look at the kin relationship, and we're up here talking about fundamental evil, and we're getting the family thing. I mean, for goodness sakes, let's wise up.
All right, final question, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Man, the judge is letting it be known. Look up here with all that dancing around, tiptoe through the tulips, as it is said. He's letting it be known. Look, man, all of these people are well connected. At the end of the day, you're dealing with bloodlines in some regard. Here we go.
We'll open it up for questions from the audience. Final question, Dr. Dyson. When you hear the phrase, and I quote, "I get that black people were upset over George Floyd, but how is rioting helping the cause for improving black communities?" First thing come to mind.
Yeah, well, let me, very entertaining anecdote of Judge Brown there. This fascinating history going on there. But at the end of the damn day, right, at the end of the day, again. We know where the real crooks are. We know where the real criminals are. Because see, those folk that he's, you know, especially those in the hood, right, in the rioting, so they're going to go to jail. They're going to serve their time. It's these ones out here who keep appealing to Judge Clarence Thomas by taxes from being seen by the Congress. It's the ones who appeal to the Supreme Court, Judge Roberts, to stay, you know, certain things occurring. So again, I'm with the judge. I just think the cast of characters, the ones who is the real criminals, not who are, who is, the real criminals are the ones you see every day claiming it. And it ain't a bigger crook in this nation than Donald Trump in America.
Wait a minute.
He ain't, look, he pimp daddy, Don Juan, Bishop Don Juan Trump. I'm out to play out just crush a lot.
Okay, now we're gonna let this little brief commercial pass. Look, now I don't know about that. Is he the biggest? Is he the biggest crook, or is he the loudest? Because there's a lot of people that know how to hide their stuff very well. But anyway.
Tell him will I love him, will I diss him? That's what they be yelling. I'm a pimp by blood, not relay song. Y'all still chase something, I'll replay something. Anyway. So, when we think about all lives matter, the judge says freedom of speech, you're absolutely right. But it's evident that white lives matter. You ain't got to say that. When Judge Joe Brown walks into a room, you can tell the man commands presence. He ain't got to announce he cold-blooded. He is cold-blooded. You say he's cold-blooded because you applaud for him. You acknowledge him. If he got to say it, you already lost the war. White lives are already evidently in mattering. Gabby Patrina, right? Right, black woman go missing, well, another sister gone. White woman, my God, Jiminy Cricket, what's going on? Let's get it done, right? What is the phenomenon of Karening in America? You hurt my feelings. I'm calling the cops. We know white lives matter. So when black folks say black lives matter, the implicit addendum, terminologically and linguistically, is two. Black lives matter too. Black lives matter also. So we ain't trying, and look, and for being perfect, no, we know these organizations ain't perfect. They were jacking Martin Luther King Jr. up in SNCC. They called him the law behind his back. That's the Black Lives Matter of that day. SNCC, and they were doing tremendous work. They went to Mississippi, they risked their lives. Robert Moses, all those folk went down there with Fannie Lou Hamer, and they risked their lives. So even though they weren't perfect, they were perfectly committed. As the great theologian Grace Jones said, I may not be perfect, but I'm perfect for you. Right? So the thing is that the Black Lives Matter of the day were dogging King, calling him the Lord. Why? And partly they dogged him because he liked to have silk pajamas. Now here's a man who's given up his life. Here's a man who's preaching every day against hatred. Here's a man who made $240,000 back in 1961 and 62 and gave every dime except $6,000 to the movement. Here's a man who gave all of his book royalties to his alma mater, an alma mater that wouldn't put him on the board of trustees until 2.5 years before he died. Why? The white man who was the head of the board of trustees, Brother Merrill Lynch, said that the King was a poor role model. Why? Because he went to jail too often. Negro, he wasn't selling crack. He was trying to crack the edifice of white supremacy and Jim Crow in American society. Now, is Black Lives Matter perfect? No. Got a $6 million crib out in LA? What's up with that? I want the judge to stop by on his way back to the crib in LA and ask what's going on. I ain't lying. Now, here's the point though. That ain't all of Black Lives Matter though. Black Lives Matter was powerful because it represented our insistence after Trayvon Martin. Then with Mike Brown. And I'm gonna get to George Floyd, give me one more minute. So the thing is, we said our lives matter. It began as a hashtag. It ended up as a movement. It was organic. It wasn't top down. It wasn't no astroturf like the Tea Party when you got a bunch of white elites manipulating the evangelical piety of ordinary citizens to try to make an end, to try to sanctify and legitimate and baptize their bigotry. No, it began with the cry from the heart of black people, dadgummit, we matter too. So, when you ask me now about what your question was, George Floyd. Now, they say, and you said what? You said specifically about George Floyd, what?
Black Lives Matter. Your thoughts?
But here's my point, though. Here's my point. I thought you said something different, but let me look. George Floyd died. Now we got Kanye. They get it down. Kanye's a friend of mine. I love him. But you listening to the right-wing documentary that told you he died from fentanyl, right? In his system. Now here's my point. Judge Joe Brown, Memphis, Tennessee. When on April 4th, 1968 at 6:01 p.m. local time, the greatest we've ever produced, I would argue, died, as one rapper said, the future took a headshot. A report rang out across a parking lot of a motel in Memphis, severing the tie and creating a gaping wound in the neck of a prophet named Martin Luther King Jr. When they did the autopsy, they discovered that due to smoking and eating, he had the heart of a 63-year-old man. Now I'm 64 now, I hope it wasn't that bad. But the point is this, did he die from arterial sclerosis or from smoking, or did the mither friggin' bullet that exploded inside of his neck kill him? George Floyd could have had a bunch of stuff in his body. It's already been scientifically deconstructed. But if you're going to go with that ignorance, the point is this. It is the pressure put by Derek Chauvin's knee on the neck of George Floyd and not treating him like a human being. Disregarding his cry, I cannot breathe. He had a black man on his back, a white man on his neck, a white man on his torso, and an Asian man on the lookout. That was multiculturalism, proving that diversity without the notion of equality is empty. You have to have diversity toward justice. So yes, I say to all of those who uphold the value of American society, blue lives matter. First of all, ain't no parallel between blue lives and black lives. One is an ontological assessment. That's a big word to talk about how you're born in your being. Black. Although we know it's political construction and fiction, as James Baldwin said, but run with me for a minute. Blue is a profession, not a state of being. If you born blue, call the darn doctor, because you ain't getting enough oxygen. My point is that we have heard the excuses that people have made to try to justify assaulting black people. We have seen them build prisons based on area codes predicting what black people will and will not do. Yes, the judge is right. We should hold each other to account. But there's a bunch of white hooligans running around now who ain't gonna never see the inside of a jail because white supremacy and white privilege will protect them. George Bush said he was a drunk until he was age 40. Now he became president of the United States of America. A lot of misbehaving white men out here doing a whole bunch of madness, and they become president, like Donald Trump. You thief. You bigot, you lugubrious leech, you apparition that steals the life and joy from democracy. Damn right, Black Lives Matter, and you can't say it enough, because Black Lives Matter means America matters, and that's what we love.
Okay, this guy is preaching. This is a sermon. He's giving a sermon. He's a performer. This is what I'm gathering from him. It's a huge performance here. But listen, I gotta push back against one thing that he said about the Black Lives Matter thing, White Lives Matter thing. Now, I got to highlight what the trick bag is. You see? Because you'll have one entity playing you against what is perceived to be your opponent, but it's not really your opponent. So here's what they say. Oh, Black Lives Matter. Then they turn around and then there'll be people saying, well, White Lives Matter. Now, let me tell you what I have peeped that's happening almost covertly, but it's like two people, they're back to back, and they don't even see the person behind them. Listen. So you'll have white people that are living in poverty, right? And let's say they're on food stamps and all of this government assistance, because we know where the bulk of the government assistance goes, right? So these people, they will be complaining about their economic condition. Well, when they hear a narrative come out that says Black Lives Matter, in their mind, what they're hearing, because of, I guess, some of the media outlets that they listen to, these particular media outlets will twist the narrative into meaning black people are saying that they're more important than you. And they're looking at it like, wait a minute, but I'm over here on food stamps. I'm struggling. I'm not rich. I've been begging, the government to try to come in and improve my economic position. And now you're telling me that they're not going to look at me because these people are getting in front and their narrative is being pushed all over the place? Hell with that. Give me a t-shirt that says White Lives Matter so I can make the government see me too. You see what I'm saying? See, but oftentimes a lot of people, they're so hell-bent into their own narrative that they forget that there's the rest of the world out there, right? And that is the okie doke that was played on a lot of the participants in the Black Lives Matter movement as what they thought that it was going to be. So everybody's being tricked and everybody's being played here. Because along came a spider and slipped a whole bunch of different agendas in that narrative. And then next thing you know, millions of dollars is being generated. And then after that, $1 million mansions are being bought. And then after that, some manifesto, some mission statement comes and says, we're here to abolish the nuclear family. What you trying to divide families? This is part of your Black Lives Matter agenda? To divide families? Wait a minute. We're trying to build community, and we know that community starts with family, and family starts with a man and a woman. I don't know what's happening to the traditions of our ancestors. I don't know what these new narratives are that are being really pushed in order to manipulate. Look. To me, it's obvious. It's quite obvious. And the more that people get outside of their own personal agenda, they'll be able to see the design quite easily. There's a saying that whenever you're in negotiations, the best way to negotiate is you have to know exactly what it is that your opponent wants. If you're just hell-bent on what it is that you want, you'll be a terrible negotiator. Especially if it's something that you really, really, really want. One of the best ways to communicate is to be invested in what is coming from the other side. And that's how you could actually say, well, where's all this White Lives Matter stuff coming from? What's now? Yes, there are some people that are white supremacists that have these that are trying to push this white power notion. You know, like, yeah, hell with all the black people. Yeah, okay, yeah, we have those. But then you also have to look at the poverty narrative and how easily and historically easy it has been to manipulate people, white people that live in poverty. All you had to do was paint a boogeyman narrative. The boogeyman narrative is, oh, the black people are the boogeyman, and they're coming to take the money that you ain't got anyway. You see? Oh, look at them. They're getting too much attention. Come on now. Oh, the government only has so much money. Look at them. They're trying to take it from you. Come on, white lives matter too. Come on. And black people are saying, wait a minute. Hold on now. What are you talking about? Shout out Chicago. PD Chicago. Shout out. You see? So it is let me tell you, it's one of the greatest tricks ever pulled. It's a wonderful, wonderful trick. To tell one person in one room one thing, and then in the other room you tell them another thing, and then you let them out in the courtyard and watch the fireworks. See, when black people said, you know, Black Lives Matter, they knew what they meant when they first said it. When Kaepernick kneeled, he knew why. Like, black people knew why he was doing it. They understood that. All right? But there are always competing narratives. Always. And the longer that you sit on your behind or just so deep into what's going on in your own mind, you'll forget that there's narratives that abound that will affect your loved one that you sleep with. You know, your daughters, your sons, you know. I mean, think about it. You know, how many men have been, you know, I mean, come on. You know, if we're being honest, yeah, you know, we probably dated a lady, you know, back in the day when we were teenagers and stuff. We dated a girl that, I don't know, she probably let us in the house when her parents weren't there, right? You know, or just, you know, skip school, you know, right? Peer pressure. Well, why is that? Because there are influences. All of us, we've been influenced in one way or another. Here, smoke this cigarette. Oh, man, I don't want. Next thing you know, you're a cigarette smoker. Influence. And that has to do with a narrative that exists either within someone that then influences you. So, we're all susceptible to that. Now, without further ado, I'm going to get back into this last portion of this debate. Here we go.
All right. We're gonna take a couple of quick questions from the audience. We have mics in the back. Folks, we want to hear from you. We're gonna take a couple of questions from the audience. All right, right here.
Looks like people are gonna buy a doctor's book over here. Thank you, Judge. I appreciate you, bro.
Go ahead. Right here.
How are you? Judge Joe Brown, I have a question. Do you support women in leadership?
Support women in leadership.
In leadership positions.
Depends on what the leadership position is.
Now, the reason I asked that.
Oh, wow. Hey. We're going to let this raggedy commercial keep going.
Because in a mayoral debate, last Thursday in Memphis.
Oh, let's get into that. I know what your question is. I'll explain it better than you can.
If I'm allowed to ask the question.
Excuse me, I know what it is.
If I'm allowed to ask the
Go
question.
ahead, I know what it's gonna be though. Go ahead. I feel you through the force.
The reason I asked is because you were quoted in the Mail debate in Memphis last week saying women can't lead because some of the places that they have to go to show
That's a
leadership.
damn lie. That's not what I said. I knew you were going there if I can explain it. What I said was this.
You didn't allow me to
Go ahead, go ahead.
ask the question.
Go ahead.
Ask the question.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
Because I understand some of the most dangerous information is misinformation. Like what you said about Barack
I get
Obama's
you.
grandparents being related to Bush. That's okay. That they would be raped.
Where's the question?
Some of the areas that they would had to go into to show leadership.
Okay, now, I knew what you were gonna ask. Here's where the truth of the matter is. I crashed this meeting by the young Democrats. They didn't want me there because they were supporting people who had been throughout their careers ripping the people of Memphis off for personal gain, all right? Now, when I got there, I put this thing out. I said, if you're gonna be the mayor, you have to get up close and personal with everybody in the city if you wanna straighten them out. That means that the next mayor is gonna have to go to places that are dangerous. When I was a criminal court judge, I walked in the hood and I'd snatch somebody off the street. Then I'd tell you to be in at 10 o'clock. What time is it? It's 11:30. You see me tomorrow at 10 a.m. All right? Now, I said in this day and time when the mayor needs to get down into the people so he can go everywhere in the city and the people think that's our chieftain. We're going to protect him. He doesn't need the police or armed guards because he's ours. Okay? A woman who is a feminist, who is chairwoman of the Young Democrats, said, since there are black women that may run for mayor, why don't you withdraw and support one of them? Well, I don't know anybody you're talking about personally. What are their qualifications? I think that question is sexist. It's misogynist because it makes some presumptions about masculine superiority. And it's also racist. Now, the truth of the matter is I gave that woman an answer that a 19-year-old female college student, a young black woman, had given me not long before. She said, Judge, you are right, because if some of us go where you need to go, somebody's going to drag us off into a vacant apartment and do things to us. That's what she said. She was 19, and all I did was quote that. And I gave an explanation. I said, I don't have any objection to a woman holding an executive office. It's just right now, in 2022, and next year in 2023, there are some things that are going to have to be done that are in line with my remarks I made earlier tonight about you taking fatherhood out of the home, fatherhood out of the hood, and you need to put somebody back in, Daddy Brown, whatever it's going to be, and you need what only I can deliver to this city in terms of straightening it around. That's what I said. But it was taken out of context. So I've been a lifetime Democrat way before this young lady was born, but they attacked me just because I wanted to get some things right. And all I was saying is it's uncomfortable. I even said, I know this is going to make some of you uncomfortable, but it's an unfortunate reality of being alive in the United States of America and in Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. You know there are some places where you go at night, you get out to pump your gas and you get to feeling nervous. Don't lie and say that isn't the case. I realize that. So I want to be the man that steps back out there and starts getting the young boys in line so they become productive citizens. Not a threat. Now, that was done so I could get somebody out of the way of somebody that says the skyline in this downtown Memphis where he stands to make several tens of millions of dollars is more important than fixing the whole city up. where somebody else is getting a play on $680 million converting a football arena into a soccer stadium.
All right.
That's where somebody's got the crazy idea that they took down some Confederate statues, and for $2,500, they got 30-some acres of public land in prime location. They can now do what they want to. That's where somebody sponsored one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen, of 25 acres in the exact center of downtown Memphis, $600,000. See, that's what I was talking about, and that is what this group was about. And they tried to do an ambush thing, and they lied about it. They quoted it out of context. It was supposed to be 150, 100 people there. There weren't but 23 people in the organization there. The rest of them were folk that were customers at this nightclub. And they were going right on, Judge, and people were running up to me to offer the campaign, including a lot of women. Now, my number one lawyer is a woman. There are several women that I know on federal appellate courts, federal, that I was mentored to, some of whom know what a woman is, unlike the current confirmed purpose person on the Supreme Court. And I have, let's see, a woman dentist, 2 women dentists, 3 women doctors, and a whole bunch that tell me what to do. And Miss Dana over here, who runs the real Dana that you can catch me on twice a week, she's like, tune in and see how we interact. But now, I don't have any problems with women being in charge, but sometimes a man's got to do what a man's got to do, because it is their obligation of men to protect womanhood and promote manhood.
And the best thing some man can do is sit your ass down and let a woman do the job.
Well, ain't that time now?
All right, next one.
Now,
Okay. I gotta say something about that. Judge Joe Brown, hey, listen. Judge Joe Brown is straight to the point. And the way that the question was framed, I don't really like that. He said, what? So you're saying that a woman can't lead? Well, Judge Joe Brown, he had to clear that up. Now, I like the way that he cleared it up, because a lot of guys are afraid to be masculine today. That's the truth. Because a lot of women some women have displayed a fear of masculinity that is unpredictable or whatever. So we get this narrative of, toxic, and I can do a whole show really, exposing that whole thing. But he essentially said, hey, listen, yes, there are places that a woman should not go, that if it's dangerous for a man, then probably a woman stands no chance. Because these are things that men know. Men know this. Most men are not delusional about the physical threat that men pose. We are, every man that is in interaction with one another knows that there is a potential threat of tension, And so typically men form what's called, a pact, which is considered to be gentlemen. But a gentleman has nothing to do with a woman, even though a lot of women think that, it has to do with them and chivalry. No. A gentleman is a man that makes a pact with his fellow brethren that this is the way that I'm going to respect you. I'll respect your wife, and these it's our way of keeping the savage nature that we already know is internal. And even if we choose to duke it out or shoot it out, we'll even do that like gentlemen. We'll count to 3, all of these rules to kind of keep man in check, because we understand that threat. But it seems as though there's this current climate that's, well, listen, you as a man, you should kind of change your manness in order to make me comfortable as a woman. And men are trying to tell women, listen, do you understand that there are animals out here? There are guys that are savages that don't care about anything that you're talking about. All your equality and all this, that, and the other. No, these guys are out to destroy, If they're a threat to other men, you know that they're going to be a threat to women. And that's what Judge Joe Brown is saying, is that men should protect the women, and women should understand that there are situations that are considerably more dangerous for a woman, and that in a utopian world, there won't be any men that will take it from you in a utopian world. But we don't live in that world. We live in the real world, and it gets very dangerous. Right? So I agree with Judge Joe Brown. It's a truth, but for some apparent reason, that truth is unpopular today because of this media idea of Superwoman going around beating up the Hulk. We live in the real world. There are men that look at other men and say, I'm not about to go mess with that threat, But it'll be someone like Robin Givens who starts going up Mike Tyson's head. It's like, hey, well, apparently she feels some sort of idea that you can't really do her like you did Mitch Green. Right? So there's this, it seems like there's kind of a disconnect there. We understand just how dangerous the world is. And I agree with this message that Judge Joe Brown has said. I believe we have like a couple more questions, and then this would be the end of the debate. So here we go.
Not in Memphis. It's my time.
Now next question.
Okay. Good evening, Dr. Brown and Dr. Dyson. I just have a quick question. As a matter of practicality, you've been listening, I would imagine many of us for decades, about the problems that plague the landscape of our community. So in terms of where we are right now, I'm a working person, a woman, and what can I do right where I am to change the landscape of my community? We know that many of the problems are systemic, and it will take another 40 or 50 decades to infiltrate that, because we have to dissolve it and then replace it with something. So in the interim, what do I do right where I am?
Dr. Dyson.
Yeah, well, look, obviously, you're playing a long game. You gotta have patience. The right wing, after Roe versus Wade, 73? They've been waiting until they got enough folk on the Supreme Court to do what they want to do. So they had some kind of ethical patience and moral deferment in order to realize an objective, right? That's number one. Number two, clearly being a highly articulate, intelligent black woman, you got to bloom where you planted. Rear your children if you're a mother. Continue to nurture them into adulthood. If you have a partner, male or female, I'm not speaking of you specifically, I'm saying whoever. Because part of the problem is toxic masculinity and the inability to imagine that another partner is not just, I hear what the judge is saying, I'm a black man, I'm 64 years old. I came up out the hood in Detroit. I understood the systemic displacement of black men through welfare policies that punished the presence of black men, but also stigmatized the presence of black women, right? 1965, the Moynihan Report warned about the coming matriarchy. Now, wait a minute now. Now, men being systemically disappeared is one thing, but demonizing the women who stayed? The kids get mad at the mama. I'm mad at you because daddy gone. The Negro left. Disappeared. Too tough for him or forced out. I'm not trying to give any judgment, but I'm saying I stayed. The black woman stayed. The prodigal son went off. But the brother or sister who stayed at home preparing your meals, making sure you got up on time, sending your butt to college. So what I'm saying to you, part of the problem is that you, as an intelligent black woman looking at the political landscape, understanding the necessity of partnering with and forging alliances with other black people and other people of conscience, other white brothers and sisters, other lesbian sisters, other non-binary people. What we have to do is to police the ethical erosion and the moral insensitivity in our own communities. I went to a black church the other day. Black woman said, well, the other year. Black woman said 2 years ago, 3 years ago, she said, you know you're going to hell. I said, well, damn, did Jesus tell you that? Because I just spoke on this morning and he ain't mentioned no flames. He said, you know why you're going to hell? Because you said that God created gay people. I said, baby, you think I'm going to hell? And you a polytheist, obviously. You believe there's a God for straight people and a God for gay people. Either God made everybody or God ain't made nobody. It ain't no in between. What? God took a break on Wednesday. You know, creating these people is too hard. I need a break. So the second shift, God came in and created gay people. That's what the white man said about you as a black person. You are incapable of moral sensitivity. You are not human. And the government that they erected determined that their theology, which was distorted, would be reflected in their sociology. Black people don't need to replicate the same madness, bigotry, and hatred of the other. I ain't never been to a black church that turns down gay ties.
I don't want to be preachy here, but this is easy to debate.
They ain't kicking no people out the choir either. Quietness is kept. You wouldn't get no Sunday morning sermon in some instances if you didn't have a gay person in the pulpit. Don't make me go there. Don't make me tell you the truth. So I'm saying, why do we turn around and practice the same kind of moral decrepitude, the ethical insensitivity of trying to demonize people and genderize our approach? I agree with the judge on this. Let the best man do the job. And often it's a woman. And let that woman step up and step forward. The women that I know in life are the ones who defend black men more than anybody else. The greatest defenders of black men are black women. It's about time that black men stepped up to the plate, supported black women, and made sure that they were comfortable and that they were creative in their own minds and hearts, because they have sacrificed so much to create us. It ain't just the rappers.
Wait a minute, man. Okay, now this dude kissing some ass. Hold on. Hold up. Now, we need to be all the way objective here. You know, because he pulled this same thing when black folks were kind of, they were kind of leery of the Johnny, whatever her name is, Ketanji Brown. They were leery. And he questioned black folks for being leery about whether or not she's going to be just another person that is being called the first black. But what is your agenda? You know, they rightfully so. They wanted to know whether or not she was going to have an agenda that was of the people, or whether or not she was just going to be another black skin to get in. You see? And he criticized them for that. Like they didn't have a justified concern. Like there wasn't a historic tendency. Like there wasn't an Obama before her that got all of the black vote and had no agenda that was to address the concerns. And he's doing this again. And that's a thing that I take issue with Michael Eric Dyson. He gets preachy, and one thing that he knows is that women are considerably more they respond more to that preaching stuff more than men do. Men typically will sit there and they'll say, you know, you use all them words, but what are you saying? Make it plain. But one thing, you know, that's why you see more women in church, and they really go for that stuff. I'm telling you, just like I told my daughter, I had a conversation with her. I was breaking it down to her, and I said, see, men know something about other men that women tend to not see. It's the same thing with women, how they can peep something in other women that men can't really see. And a man knows when another man is running game, and even if he's not running game for the sake of you know, getting something from you. It could be just a performance, you know, like telling a story, and he might embellish on a couple of points, right? But typically a man knows, like when he's in church, he knows, man, he's like, man, you know, the preacher's doing what the preacher does. So you wonder why there aren't so many men in church, because of that, all that preaching stuff. You know, it's like, hey, look, I need solutions. Look, and that's why I think Judge Joe Brown, his message resounds more with men. Michael Eric Dyson, he seems like he's placating the women a lot, you know, and demonizing men, even when Ketanji Brown chose to marry a white man. He turned around and said, yeah, well, because y'all black men don't like dark skin. I didn't like that. I said, how come she just couldn't choose what she wanted? And so I did an edit on that, and y'all could check it out. That's the one where is Tariq Nasheed roasts Michael Eric Dyson. I did an edit to that. I included certain clips and certain things. And one of the things that I included was a few women that said that they don't mess with black men anyway. Dark-skinned black women that were making their decision because they don't like dark-skinned men. They don't like men that are too close to black-looking. One said that all she wanted was a white boy. So I said, now how come he didn't tell that side of the narrative? How come he's trying to demonize the men? See? So he's always been kind of, he's a very articulate guy, but he dances too much for the Democrats. You know? It's like he came out and was criticizing Obama, and next thing you know, he must have got a phone call because he changed his tune quickly. You know? So that's my only thing with Michael Henry Dyson. It's like, dude, I don't. Come on, bro. It's like, come on, man. You seem like you're easily bought or something. And when you give your message as articulate as you are, I believe that you can be a powerful weapon, because I've seen the brother debate, and I've seen him debate when he's like in the right spirit, right? I've seen him debate when he's in the right spirit, and then I've seen him just show off. You know, he just uses too many damn words. It's like, come on, bro. You know, now I understand more words than I use, and communication is one thing, but there's a lot of people, especially brothers, when they hear all them words, they're like, man, this dude run a game. You know? Now, people that are, educated, have a huge, vocabulary. They love this type of stuff. And do you know who typically has a larger vocabulary between men and women? It's not men. Women have typically a larger vocabulary. So here you have two men that identify as black, One is coming with the masculine, male, the man's perspective, more of the man's perspective. That's Judge Joe Brown. The other one, he's coming from kind of a feminine advocacy perspective, And while I think that, hey, it's good to have a broad scope, a broad perspective, you come across as disingenuous, dude. Like extremely disingenuous. Yeah, you hit certain points after the judge hit them, but I'm like, come on, man, stop that. You spoke about Black Lives Matter, and then you just glossed over the fact that, you made a joke about the mansion thing, about them buying mansions. You made a joke. No, that thing is a problem. How come you just couldn't say that? Don't make a joke about that and be like, well, Judge, why don't you stop by the mansion when you're on your... No. Come on, bro. You saw what these people did. It's like he's afraid to really tackle it or to really pinpoint a problem, and then turns around and then says, some lady told him that he's going to hell. He's like, oh, well, so the guy that made that and didn't make this, essentially saying that, hey, you can't even call out anything that you see as an issue. No, you got to be silent. I mean, come on. That's not how Judge Joe Brown is. And I don't want to sound biased because, hey, I otherwise like Michael Eric Dyson. He's a cool guy with a whole bunch of words. You probably don't want to play him in a game of Scrabble. I tell you that right now. But it's the past few years. Listen, see, I'm gonna tell you this. I've always. I don't say like anything negative because I never met the guy. I've never met him, but I peeped him, and he seems like he tries to stay on par with whomever is his the person that he's speaking with. So I saw him. He was on this thing with Louis Farrakhan. They had Cornel West. It was one of the things Tavis Smiley held. And I watched him on there, and I think that's when I really got a glimpse of his speaking. And I said, okay. But I noticed that, Farrakhan, he didn't have to do much to command the attention of the room. And I just remember seeing Michael Eric Dyson. He looked like he was trying to get some of that fire, get some of them claps and stuff. Nothing like what the minister was able to get. But, I always said, man, he is a performer. If he could just get off of that thing where he's trying to regale you with all of his speech, make you say, ooh, ah, Man, do you know how many people have said, dude, you're using too many words? I remember T.I. was next to him, and they were doing some little thing. I forget. They were doing some little talk. And he said, Bedford Stuyvesant. Everybody else says Bed-Stuy. And he's in the Bedford Stuyvesant. I'm like, come on, man. Stop it, man. Stop it, dude. Man, T.I., even T.I. T.I. was like, oh, hell no. It's like, come on, man. So I'm like, okay, bro, I like him otherwise. I don't want to beat up on him, But Judge Joe Brown, I'll tell you this much. Judge Joe Brown surprised me, right? Because we all know Judge Joe Brown as the straight talking judge from the Judge Joe Brown show, right? Well, Judge Joe Brown lets it be known he does not mince his words. He is an advocate of masculinity. And I think that is a good thing, right? I mean, a lot of women, they want masculine men. You don't want somebody to come around there and tell them, I don't want to kill the roach. You scared and he's scared. Both y'all holding each other because y'all both running from the cockroach or the boogeyman or whatever. I mean, look, we're supposed to compliment each other. And this idea of, well, you know, men are optional. Think about that. What would that leave you? What state would that leave the community in? Now your own son walking around switching left and right. Come on. And it's unpopular to even say anything to him today. Well, I believe that this was a very interesting review of this entire talk. You know, you get to see some interesting perspectives here. The different generations, you know, they're the old guard, you know, debating their mindsets. One is considerably more conservative, even though he says he's an independent. That's Judge Joe Brown. Judge Joe Brown is a conservative, big time. Michael Larry Dyson, he's more liberal. And a lot of times, you know, hey, whatever is your leaning, I'm going to say this. I found it more difficult for liberal-minded people to argue the current narrative. I find it more difficult for them to argue the current narrative and still remain logical. I found it quite arduous for them because there's so many contradictions. All right. But hey, you got a great glimpse, just like I did, into these two brilliant-minded people. You have a judge and you have a professor. One judge has a whole lot of experience and the professor has a whole lot of words and a lot of experience as well. I'm not going to take that away from him. But hey, this has been a long stream. I am glad that we got to do this today because I've been working on some content. I have been really pushing this stuff, really trying to get it together because I'm kind of a perfectionist and I like my stuff to be all the way right. And I had some people asking for a documentary. They wanted me to go into detail into some of these subject matters that I tackle when I give a presentation. And that's essentially what these things are for. You know, I do this as a conversation starter. And the best way to really get this ball rolling is, hey, look, contributions from y'all. A story, a topic, all of these different things. You have an article, a website, a link. Don't be afraid to email it or post it. I do read the comments. So email the greatest of these at yahoo.com. And be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and share. Appreciate all you guys for tuning in. Because right now I am sleepy. And I still have more work to do. But hey, if I don't do it, it'll never get done. Shout out to The Real Dana. Go to her channel to watch the entire debate. These two great minds, even though Michael Larry Dyson, come on, man. Stop that pandering, dude. You do a lot of that stuff. You can call it out. You're afraid that the women will be mad at you or something. You know, that's why you can't really call out, you know, some of the issues. You know, Let's talk about it now. Come on. Yeah, we spoke about the Moynihan report. You know, he spoke about the Moynihan report that he spoke about. You know, that the black community would be turned into a matriarchy. And then he just said, well, she stayed, blah blah blah. I'm like, come on, man. You know that there's another side to that narrative now. But what you do is you pass this narrative that demonizes the men or just absolves the women. And I'm like, dude, there has to be balance. If we can't speak truth here, then we'll never get to any sort of resolution. And I think that's why Judge Joe Brown connects more with the family. Thanks a lot. Shout out to Alma Dixon Cider, and I appreciate all your loyalty and all of you loyal subscribers and your contribution to this channel. Couldn't do it without you guys. Oh, well, good night. And whatever, good morning. Remember, always keep it logical. Keep a clear head. Don't be so invested in an idea that you're too close to it to see what's really going on. Sometimes you need to back away in order to get a clearer picture. Keep it logical and never let anyone. What? I said never let anyone control your narrative. No music today, guys. It's too loud. Peace.